Good evening, everybody. Well, I think we need more chairs. So if we can bring more chairs, just at the back of the... Yeah. Well, thanks. I mean, it's a... I don't know how to say it, actually. It's a great pleasure and a great honor. And it's with... Well, a big emotion that we're having this evening, special evening dedicated to Eric Rouleau, with friends of Eric Rouleau. I would like, so my role here is just to keep, I mean, the timing, okay? So I won't say anything and leave all friends of Eric Rouleau to talk. I just, if you can allow me just to say that as a Middle Eastern scholar, and when I used to be a student, I grew up with Eric Rouleau's writing. And so it's part of our, let's say, legacy. And this book is, for me, a fundamental readings that I would and I expect at one point to be able to assign to my students in English. So this is the suggestion that I would say tonight. So please, the organization is, we have major speakers, main speakers, Lakhdar, Brahimi, and Alain Gresh, plus other friends. And I would call first Dean Fahmy, Ambassador Fahmy, to introduce this evening, and please.
Thank you, Sandrine. Thank you very much. And I'd like, on behalf of the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, to welcome you all here this evening. I'm very happy that, as usual, we have a surplus crowd outside, so we'll try to get into the topic quickly, because I think this is a very interesting event. To do this, and by the way, in this particular hall, in Oriental Hall, I think is of particular significance because of the interest that the author we're celebrating had in our region, and frankly, if I would add also to what Sandrine said, the contribution he made in his writings and then his diplomacy thereafter. Over the last few years, we have regularly, as a School of Global Affairs, held what we call the Tahrir dialogues. Dialogues about trying to define the identity of Egypt and the identity of the Middle East in the 21st century and how we move on. It's been a very interesting, very engaging debate, and we will continue to do that in the future. This event is not one of those dialogues, but nevertheless, I was very happy to come and open it with Sandrine, because I think to discuss the experiences and the history of the author that we're honoring today tells a lot about societal exchanges and how this whole region has changed. So it's a very important event for us. I want to thank, frankly, all of those who have participated with us. We have two marvelous speakers here up at the podium. Both of whom I've known very well. Lakhdar Brahimi was the foreign minister of Algeria. He was under Secretary of State at the UN. He's an international peacemaker. Any diplomat or former diplomat of my age learned a lot from Lakhdar, but I would also add to that I've had the honor of being his friend over a number of years, and on both tracks it's been, frankly, a pleasure and an honor and a learning experience for me. Alain Gresh is a prolific specialist on the Middle East. He chairs the Monde Diplomatique now. He's also born in Egypt, as was Eric Rouleau, which is a very interesting thing to sort of watch how foreigners who, I don't know if you can actually call either of them a foreigner, frankly, to be fair to you, but people of a different culture look at what we're doing and comment on it, not from a completely objective fashion, but with rationality, but at the same time an empathy and a passion towards the region. His only problem, frankly, is for my generation, Lomond was Eric and Eric was Lomond. So you're going to have to compete with that legacy a bit, but I'm sure you'll do fine in that respect. I want to thank the Ambassador of France and l'Institut Français d'Egypte because, and of course the Al-Tanany Publishing House, because they are our co-partners in putting this event together. to celebrate the Arabic translation or the Arabic publication of Eric Rouleau's book is extremely important because it brings the knowledge to the market here in the Middle East, and we couldn't have been able to do that without the support of the French Embassy and the interests of the Institute. Ambassador Parant, thank you very much, and thank you for being here. We're always happy to have you here at these events. Thank you. I think what's important really in this Arabic launch, as I was just saying, it tells a story for Arabic readers, and that's something, frankly, which is lacking in many respects. A foreign story or a semi-foreign story for the Arabic reader. But I also want to say that when you read the book, or any of you who have known Eric in the past, you could really understand the value of his contributions in this regard, because on the one hand, he was a journalist of the highest professional integrity. At the same time, he became a diplomat that was honored by the French president, and he was also somebody who had a tremendous empathy and was very proud of both Egypt and France, and was always looking at the deeper meaning of the events and how to move forward. I've always enjoyed reading his articles. As I said in the past, we were honored to have Eric Rouleau, the late Eric Rouleau, here a few years ago with Costa Gavras and Lakhdar Brahimi when they were producing a film about him, and he was in the process of writing his book. So this is frankly a culmination of what we're doing in this respect. I'm going to close by asking the ambassador to come and say a few words as well. As I said, he's a partner with us in this process. But let me say that I am 100% confident that in spite that you're all quite jammed into this room, it's going to be a beneficial evening, and that we're all going to really gain a lot from being here. Thank you very much. Ambassador, can I give you the floor, please?
Thank you, Mr. Fahmy. Je vais peut-être d'abord m'excuser auprès de tous ceux qui ne sont pas francophones, mais je vais m'exprimer en français, non pas par principe. J'aurai toutes les raisons ici de m'exprimer en anglais, mais parce que je suis malgré tout plus à l'aise dans ma langue maternelle. Merci. Messieurs les ministres, messieurs les ambassadeurs,
Mr. Excellency's Minister, Excellency Ambassador Lakhdar Brahimi, Minister Mohammed Faiq, Mr. Mustafa Al-Tanany, Mr. Alain Gresh, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for Nabil Fahmy for hosting us and the beautiful words. I would like to thank you and thank School of Global Affairs and Public Policy that is hosting us in the Oriental Hall at the AUC. I also thank Ms. Sandrine Gamblin, the head of Middle East Studies Center, and the assisting team. Even if the issue is related to talking about the memory of Eric Rouleau that we lost a few months ago, I'm happy because we all meet here, and I'm also happy because we are receiving Lakhdar Brahimi and His Excellency the Ambassador, who came specifically for this occasion. And I would like to extend my thanks to Mr. Mustafa Al-Tanany and his publishing house for launching Eric Rouleau diaries in Arabic language. Mustafa Al-Tanany not only publish and translate the Eric Rouleau's work, but he wanted to return Eric Rouleau to the Egyptian and show his ongoing concern with Egypt and the importance of the relation that he built with the politician and the Egyptian educated class. Mr. Mustafa Al-Tanany focused on the important role that Eric Rouleau played in the Middle East. And he actually made a lot of research and focused on the various things that Eric Rouleau did and his participation and commitment, and he enriched this Arabic translation with his comments. I would like also to thank Mustafa Al-Tanany. But what's really interesting about the life of Eric Rouleau, that he was born in Egypt in 1926, and then he traveled in 46 to France, where he worked in Le Monde, daily Le Monde, in the period where the Middle East was at that time, and he managed to decipher the Middle East and its issues in the second half of the 20th century. No doubt that his concern is due to the different relations that he had. I can say that I really envy him for his actually phone book, which is full of many numbers, and he managed to trespass the borders, and he was like a historic analyst and a researcher, and he met Mitterrand. And Mitterrand requested from Eric Rouleau to be a diplomat. Eric Rouleau is actually is a researcher, journalist who was actually much concerned with the Middle East, and this helped on more understanding between the East and the West in the hardest time. He was from the people who fostered the friendly relation, like Michel Serra and Alexandre Lapetieux. I also would like to refer to this, to those actually educated people. I will tell you the last lines that Alain Gresh wrote in the French copy of the diaries. In the first meeting of the French ambassadors that was held in Paris after Eric Rouleau was hired, where each diplomat has to present himself and determine the country that he moved to. Who says, one said to Côte d'Ivoire, the other Argentine. Eric Rouleau stood and said, I'm Eric Rouleau, I moved to the world. There was silence in the hall and laughter, and this actually was a slip of the tongue. Eric Rouleau considered himself to be ambassador for Le Monde and the whole world, that he actually went to the north and the south, or is he the French ambassador in Tunisia, in addition to a word that he's trying to decipher? I would like to leave a chance for the speakers who knew Eric Rouleau, specifically Mr. Lakhdar Brahimi, who actually presented the Arabic version of the book. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. May I join you to thank everybody who made this event possible. So you said it, but I would like to repeat it because it wasn't possible without, well, GAP, the French Embassy and the Institut Français d'Égypte, Lucienne d'Alençon, excusez-moi, Lucienne d'Alençon et toute son équipe, et particulièrement nos speakers. I'm sorry, I'm shifting to another language. I'm really sorry. I knew that it would happen. I'm sorry. So, I'm not supposed to. So, Lucienne d'Alençon, who helped and organized with us, with GAP and MESC, the Middle East Study Center, this event. Our guest speakers, Alain Gresh, Lakhdar Brahimi, Mohamed Faye, the ambassador of Algeria, who is honoring us today and came this evening. This event wouldn't have been possible with this partnership. And I think it's a great tribute to Eric Rouleau in the sense that it bridges, well, 3 languages, as you can see, that I've switched from one to another one. So 3 languages, institutions, and dedicated to the Middle East, and bridging also, I mean, what we call East and West, and Eric Rouleau was one of the major figures to try to, well, to contribute to our understanding of the Middle East and to bridge the Middle East with the rest of the world. So this is why this event is symbolically very strong, and regarding the partnership that we managed to organize and to have tonight. So that's the only thing that I would say tonight. So I would like also to thank the publisher, Mustafa Al-Tanany, who is actually at the very beginning of the initiative for this Arabic version. And I guess that Eric Rouleau, well, was still alive when it started. So if you would like to come and tell us a little bit about the story of this project of the Arabic version, the Arabic translation, that would be really great. Thank you very much.
مساء الخير.
Good evening. At the beginning, I would like to welcome all of you and thank you for opening in this evening where we celebrate the issuing the book of the Near East Behind the Seats, Memories of a Diplomat and Journalist Eric Rouleau, who died at the beginning of this year after his rich trip in journalism and diplomat's journey. Allow me to thank Mr. Lakhdar Brahimi, whose presence among us now shows the faithfulness and sincere appreciation for the deceased. And he responded with all humbleness and wrote the introduction of the Arabic version. I thank Alain Gresh because he exerted an effort that this publication came to light. Because this version came to light and collecting these rare photos that it was difficult to collect, which actually we were astonished that Eric Rouleau never kept photos. So it was a tremendous effort to find the photos in front of you on the screen. We won't miss to thank His Excellency Ambassador André Parant, Ambassador of France in Egypt, for his concern about the book and organizing this workshop celebrating the memory of Eric Rouleau as a French citizen, national, who and will always be a source of proudness for his country. I heard the name of Eric Rouleau at the first time in my early study in Frère school in Cairo, and this because of the great impact of his first meeting with the last former president Gamal Abdel Nasser in the middle of the 60s from the last century, which really made all the Francophones proud in Egypt. And most of the Francophones were teachers to me at the Frère schools. They were repeating his name in all what they say in class. Eric Rouleau's name remained in my mind, which made me always keen to follow him all his journey in journalism as diplomat, as having a rich experience, especially that he was actually connected with socialism in Egypt, France, and the world, and being connected with the Arab issues, especially Palestinian issue, and being a Jew, Egyptian Jew, was actually before my eyes. He was born in Egypt and lived and learned in Fuad al-Awwal University and took his first steps in his career as a journalist in it, and he kept being attached to it and supporting its cases in spite of the crisis that he was actually nearly expelled from it at the beginning of the 50s of the last century because he was connected with communist cases, also because he was of 48 setback and the announcement of Israeli state. When I read the French copy of the book, I had the idea of reading and publishing it in Arabic, and the people whom I consulted in this issue was one of the great professors. He is the communist Saad Zahran, and he had opinion about the politicians that he lived with, and he had a great opinion, but his knowledge of Eric Rouleau was for his best interest. He actually praised him. He was a nobleman and respectable politician and an excellent journalist, and in spite that the guy Saad Zahran was not known at that time, he remembered Eric Rouleau. His memory was not that good, but he remembered him immediately, and he told me how they spent time in one of the casinos in Cairo where the Israeli aggression started on Egypt in '67, and how Eric was really very upset, and he was nervous because he was as if he was Egyptian who's suffering a war. I didn't hesitate when I took the decision to start to having the rights of publication of the book, which is considered a certificate of the incidents that he witnessed and that Eric Rouleau shared in his journey with politics, and a journey that extended to 70 years. Alain Gresh helped me to conclude the deal and hasten in implementing it because he knew that the issuance of this diaries in Egypt and in Arabic, it will be a source of happiness for him. And his godfather and his professor, Eric Rouleau, Eric Rouleau remained all his life belonging to his country, Egypt, and he was actually a fluent speaker of the Arabic language. And we started to prepare the book for publication where Eric was still alive and let his last wishes be fulfilled. But unfortunately, he passed away a few days after signing the publication contract, which actually made us force us to publish the book to make his soul satisfied. So he wanted that great personnel would write the introduction of the book to show and tell the people the role that Eric Rouleau played in serving Arabic issues, which is represented in His Excellency Mr. Lakhdar Brahimi, who actually he witnessed something and said things that is great about gratitude. And this gratitude and appreciation is shown by the attendance of this august gathering of Egyptian, French, American who gather today on the lands of Egypt on the honor of the Eric Rouleau, celebrating his memory. And he was supposed to be between us, Mr. Mohammed Fahmy, and he's on his way from Mexico, and he insisted to come. He is one of the founders of Egypt, and he is a witness by virtue of his work to be a minister of mass media information at the time of Eric Rouleau. Now it's the time that Eric Rouleau's name would actually be honored and appreciated in his homeland Egypt that he loved so much. The publication of the translation of the book and preparing for this forum is only a small thing that we can present with all love and appreciation to the value of this man and the value of his experience. And we hope that those efforts would collaborate from different entities so that this great name would actually take the honor and appreciation as one of the Egyptians who loved Egypt. So he remained in their heart and minds, even if actually they didn't have the nationality. At the end, I would like to thank Dr. Nabil, Fahmy, and the AUC that invited us for this evening, and the French Institute that shared in the preparing for it. And I extend my thanks to all of you. May the spirit of the noble gentleman Eric be blessed in heaven. Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa. Mr. Lakhdar, Brahimi, would you like to tell us about it?
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you so much. I don't know why I have decided to speak in Arabic, so allow me please to do so. I would like to welcome all of you. Good evening. Thank you so much to Dr. Nabil Fahmy for your generous hosting to us here on this occasion, and I do believe it's a very important occasion. So thank you to the AUC, thank you to Sandrine, thank you to the French ambassador for his generosity, because he was the reason who got me here to Egypt. Thank you all so much for your attention paid to this book and to this man. I believe that talking about Eric Rouleau could actually be threefold. First, the man actually lived for a long time, and he produced a lot in writing, he moved around a lot, and he did more than writing. While reading the book, you will find out about all of this. You will find that he played additional roles, actually, in addition to being a writer, being a witness on what used to take place in our region and in the world. Alain Gresh knew him personally better than me, and so I think that Alain will be a better speaker on Eric than myself. Also, regarding the book, Eric Rouleau knew Africa quite well. He wrote about Africa a lot. He also knew about Iran, and he was an ambassador at Turkey. But his 400-page book, it's in French, 400 pages, but I don't know what about in Arabic. It's all about Egypt and the Palestinian cause. There are some references, of course, to other entities, but they all come within the course of talking about Egypt, the Palestinian cause, and the Arab-Israeli conflict. And hence, I think to simplify things, one could say that talking about this book necessitates talking about the man and talking about the city, Cairo, in particular. And also, of course, talking about the Palestinian cause. The main point that I would like to highlight here, and I think that I've already mentioned that in the introduction, it's about the importance of this book to our youth. It's really, really important for the Arab youth to know more about the era that Eric Rouleau wrote a lot about, the 50s and the 60s of the last century. Sometimes I get really astonished and disappointed, actually, to find youth who don't know anything about Belgrade, about Bandung, about the Arab Summit conferences, while there are conferences every couple of days. Also, the first Iraq conference that was held in Cairo, the Bandung conference in 1955. All these different conferences and events, they are historical landmarks, and our youth must know them. The more important than this is what is regarding the Palestinian cause and what's happening on the ground in Palestine these days. It actually necessitates our attention and our felicitations to the Palestinian people, in fact. So, I have known Eric Rouleau in 1963 here, during his first visit after, of course, his migration from Egypt and his return in 1963, his first return. I arrived at Cairo as an ambassador in 1963, just a few months before he arrives in his first visit. We kept on meeting in Cairo whenever he arrived in Cairo, and he mentioned some of these meetings in his book. Let me summarize to you one or two meetings that I think were very important. In 1968, when the Palestinian resistance received the leadership of the Liberation Organization, Yasser Arafat and his group, they came here to Cairo, and coincidentally there was the conference of solidarity with Arab peoples. People used to call these conferences the condolences conferences as a result of what happened to us in 1967. I think that the greatest audience, or the biggest audience, was from France, including Eric Rouleau. So Lutfi Holy and Ahmed Bahauddin told me that these are the new Palestinian leaders. They know absolutely nobody in the world, and nobody in the world knows them. So it's a really good opportunity to have all this international audience here. So maybe you can conduct a meeting between the Palestinian guys and those people. So we just invited everybody, and the French people were, of course, as I told you, the biggest audience, and they said we won't be able to attend. And the invitation was a last-minute thing, so they told us we won't be able to make it because we have some business with the French ambassador. So we said, okay. Eric Rouleau went to the French ambassador at the time and told him, of course, you know that the Algerian ambassador has a dinner for the Palestinian group and so on. So the French ambassador said then, okay, consider the dinner cancelled. And this was a problem later on because, of course, the visitors were increased. And in Garden City, there was the meeting with Yasser Arafat, and based on this, there were very strong relations between the Palestinian leaders and Eric Rouleau, especially Abu Iyad. And Eric Rouleau wrote a book about Abu Iyad, and the first statement was, I met Abu Iyad for the first time in the house of the Algerian ambassador in Cairo. This is a very important scene. Also, we met in Tunisia when he was the ambassador there, because I used to work at the Arab League there. And we used to meet at the embassy, at his embassy, and also at Yasser Arafat's. The more important thing than his meetings with the Palestinians is what he wrote about this period. And regarding the youth in particular, Israelis have made an incredible success in convincing the world in 1967 that they are going to be attacked and that Israel is practically over, and that their battle is a lost battle, and that Israel is practically over, as I said. They convinced the whole world of this. And I confess that at that time, we believed that there was a hope that Israel was going to be defeated in that war. Second, when the war began, they convinced the whole world that Egypt was the aggressor. And I remember that Alain Besançon, who was a French journalist there, in his first statement in June 5th, said, Egypt attacked Israel, Egypt attacked Israel, Egypt attacked Israel. These were his first words. They convinced the world that Israel was in danger, Egypt started the war, and that Israel has miraculously made it out of the war. Of course, this was as a result of the genius of Moshe Dayan. Eric Rouleau wrote in detail about what happened. Eric Rouleau said the war was 6 hours, not 6 days, because they destroyed the Air Force in Egypt and in Syria in a mere matter of 6 hours. But the more important thing here is that Israelis knew quite well that the Egyptian army wasn't in a situation that would allow it to fight, and that they were going to achieve victory easily. Years later, one of the officers said that what's the issue of Israel being in danger? Israel wasn't in danger whatsoever. The only surprise was that we expected the war was going to go on for 15 days, so it just went on for 6 days. This was the only surprise we faced at the time. Now, in the documents that were published from the U.S. archives, they say that the Johnson's administration at the time told the Israelis that you are correct, you are going to be victorious, our analyses go in the same direction. And it's as if they were telling them, go ahead, you are going to be victorious, don't worry. In fact, as I told you, Israelis managed to convince the world, and unfortunately they did convince some of us indeed that we were the aggressors, it was a mistake from Egypt, and that they asked to retrieve the international troops from Sinai and so on. So what is to be found in this book is totally different. It's the truth. So, any of you who have saw Netanyahu in the General Assembly, he kept on saying, we want peace with the Palestinians, but we have no partner. Many people, the majority of the world, believe so. And it was known that Abdel Nasser in particular wanted no peace absolutely with Israel. All he wanted was war, war, and more war. In this book, you will find that at least 2 or 3 scenes as follows. First, the letter sent by Abdel Nasser to the Israelis in different manners. One of them was through Eric Rouleau, saying the following: let's look for a solution. The second issue that is no less important is the invitation of Abdel Nasser through Eric Rouleau to Goldman, who is a very important figure. He wasn't part of the Israeli government, but he was the head of the Jewish Congress, the International Jewish Congress. He was invited and he accepted the invitation, but he couldn't come to Egypt before consulting with the Israeli government, and the Israeli government said it's impossible for you to go to Egypt. All of this will be found in the book. And in fact, I do wonder, why hasn't this book been translated into English or any other languages? It's a valid question, I believe, and it has to be asked. And I think that there are facts that do not go or do not correspond to what people know in the West and especially in the USA. So, am I running out of time or? In fact, Eric Rouleau, after finishing writing at Lomond, and after his retirement from the diplomatic work, he kept being interested in this region very seriously, and he kept on monitoring what used to happen here. And he was in close connection to Layla Shahid from the PLO in Paris and then Brussels. They were actually neighbors in southern France. Their houses were next to each other. In 2009, Eric Rouleau asked from Post Gavras and myself to come with him to Egypt. He didn't use this word and neither did we. But what happened was that it was the farewell visit. And I remember that on this occasion we came here. We were 3, Costa Gavras, myself, and Eric Rouleau. But he didn't allow us to speak. Each of us, when we just got to speaking, he stopped us. And people were really happy to listen to him. They weren't really interested in listening to me or to Costa Gavras. They came to listen to Eric Rouleau. And it was a very touching visit for him and for us. And it was funny that during the second visit, he went with Costa Gavras to Heliopolis, to the house where he was born. And they knocked on the door. It's a villa, I guess, right? So the door was opened, and he said, my name is Eric Rouleau, I used to live here, and I don't know whether or not they've known him. And then the house owner said that I think this is the first time that a Palestinian man would take the house of a Jewish man, because the new owner of the house was Palestinian. So Eric Rouleau took us to different places, including Semiramis. I don't know whether or not you still go to the night and day in Semiramis or not. It was the meeting of everybody at night, and Eric Rouleau wrote a little bit about this. So we went there and we apologized, and we were very sad about what happened to Semiramis. Among the most unfortunate things that I think happened in Cairo was that the old Semiramis was demolished, though it could have been preserved some way or another. Anyways, they do have night and day now, but
الحمد لله على السلامة. أنا عارف المرور.
welcome.
الحمد لله على السلامة.
I came from Mexico, you know.
فيعني رحنا للسيميراميس.
So we went to Semiramis, we saw the night and day, and whoever reads the book will find that he says, I used to go to Semiramis with them wearing slippers and a shirt without a tie, so I thought that maybe I can come today in the same manner, wearing slippers in my feet, but I thought that this won't be very appropriate for my age today. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I would like to thank Mr. Mustafa Al-Tanany for his initiative for publication of this book in Arabic, because once I read it in French, I said it would be great if this book was published for the Arabic reader, especially for the youth. They will find in it many things that we ourselves read it in a bit of a nostalgic manner. But God willing, the youth will read it, learn from it, and discover in it things that the Israeli propaganda managed to conceal, not only from the world, but even from us. Thank you all so much, and thank you to anyone who has been part of this initiative.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brahimi. I mean, I think the point of passing to the next generation testimony, like the one that Eric Rouleau is leaving, actually, I think it's what I mean, to students, but also our young generations, that's really the great contribution. I'm sorry I haven't introduced you before, but I think that there was no need to introduce you. So, so please, Alain Gresh, would you like to, I mean, to give us your... Yeah.
Okay. شكرا. أولاً عايز أشكر طبعاً الجامعة الأمريكية.
I would like to thank the AUC and Dr. Nabil Fahmy for hosting the day, the French Embassy and the French Ambassador André Lakhdar Brahimi, who wrote the introduction to this book, and to everybody who has exerted great efforts to have this seminar, especially Sandrine and Luciel. And I would like also to thank the translator called Dalia Saoudi, who's not with us today, and she is an Egyptian citizen who lives in Saudi Arabia, and she exerted lots of efforts in translation, and it wasn't an easy task. And finally, I would like to thank Mustafa Al-Tanany not only for being the publisher of this book, but for the reasons of publishing this book. He told me that this book first has to be published in Egypt, not in any other Arab country. It could have been published in Lebanon, for example, but he said it has to be published in Cairo. Why? Because the Egyptian people must know the role of Eric Rouleau, including the elite, the journalists, and the youth. It's really important for them to know this. It's really important in the Egyptian history, because Eric Rouleau has been a part of this Egyptian history. You know that Eric Rouleau was born in 1926 in Cairo in a Jewish family. Their native tongue was French. Part of the Jews and even the Copts and foreigners in general spoke French. And I remember when we used to be in downtown, we always used to hear French and not Arabic, unfortunately. And he grew up within this atmosphere, and It was a very important period. It was the 30s, and this was the new revival of the national Egyptian move, especially in 1935, when the huge protests against the English took place. And also in 1936 with the victory of Al-Wafd party in the elections, and there were huge protests, and he was part of this tumultuous environment. And thus he played a very important role in his vision to the world. I said that he was part of a Jewish family from the middle class. They were not poor. He went to the university, and just like any young man, he used to wonder, who am I? What's the future? What are the reasons of life? And at the beginning, he thought that maybe he could be a rabbi. For 6 months, he thought that religion might be the essential question. And then he thought of being part of a Zionist group. And what is really weird is that up till the 1940s, these Zionist groups were actually situated in downtown, and all their activities were in plain sight to everybody. So one of these groups was a Zionist from the extremists. So when he wanted to join them, he said that they paid absolutely no attention to the Egyptian people. They only cared for the Jews and for moving them into Palestine. So after some time, he thought that this is not the future, and he believed that he was part of the Egyptian people, and that the essential cause for the Egyptian people was the cause of getting the English occupation out of Egypt, the British occupation out of Egypt, and he wanted to be part of this. So he went to some of the Marxist and leftist groups, but they had many divisions. But at that time there were huge developments regarding these groups and for the Egyptian liberation movements. In 1946 witnessed the biggest strike for the Egyptian people, and there was an establishment of the National Commission of Students and Workers, and he was part of all these incidents, of course. Then, of course, 1947, the division of Palestine, 1948, the establishment of Israel, and this created a very particular problem for the Jews. Most of the Egyptian Jews were not Zionists. Very, very few of them wanted to actually move to Israel, but of course, at the meanwhile, with the conflict between Israel and the Arabs, there were questions about whether or not Jews were considered Zionists. Are Jews the spies of Israel? And we do know that Israel used some of the Jews in Egypt for spying purposes. And so, unfortunately, there was no future for the Jews in Egypt. Most of them didn't go to Egypt. Some, like Eric Rouleau, went to France. Some others went to other parts of Europe. They didn't want to go to Israel. Eric Rouleau had a particular case. The king said that they should be kicked out, or he said that either you migrate or you go to prison. So either to leave the Egyptian nationality or go to prison, and of course he opted for leaving Egypt. With the progress of the Israeli-Arab conflict, there was a common a misunderstanding that among Arab intellectuals and Arab audience in general, that Zionists are the same as Jews. However, throughout history, many Jews have actually rejected traveling to Israel. The biggest Jewish state nowadays is the USA, not Israel. And so there has to be some difference or some distinction made between Jews and Zionists. When, of course, he had a French background, he found a job in Agence France Presse, and at that time, of course, there was no internet. There was no radio. They just used to work like that, so he had to listen to speeches made by the Arabs.
When he came, the speech of President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalizing of Suez Canal, at night he was listening to that speech, and he heard Gamal Abdel Nasser that he nationalized the Suez Canal. So he wrote a message and he said, Abdel Nasser took the decision of nationalization, and the officials said, no, this is impossible. So for 2 hours, they said, no, we will not publish this. This is, of course, a wrong news. So at the end, you know that it was true. And this made Eric Rouleau actually to be somehow, like we can say, that he was... and he went to the Le Monde. It was an important daily Le Monde. It was for intellectuals, for educated politicians, and it plays a role that it's difficult to understand today, because today we have internet, we have satellite channels, we have all those things are there. So it's not possible to understand the role of a newspaper like Le Monde. But at that time, he was publishing in Le Monde. Every day there was an article on foreign policy. They were reading it everywhere in the world in the 60s or 70s. So the person who writes in Le Monde really was popular and well-known. So he started to write a lot of things on the liberation movement, national liberation movements in Congo, with Patrice Lumumba case, and he wrote a lot of things, and he was supposed to be responsible about the Middle East. But the problem that he was to say which Arab country, because he was a Jew. So it was not he was supposed to go to any Arab country because he was Jew. So he was supposed to go to Israel, Lebanon. In '62, he went to see his official, and he said, I cannot be responsible and not be able to go there. So after a few months, by coincidence, there was a special invitation by President Abdel Nasser for him to go to Egypt. And this was the first interview that Abdel Nasser made with a French newspaper. At that time, we have to think that the relations between Egypt and France at that time was a bit difficult. Of course, there was in Suez in '56 and the war of Algeria, but in '62, the Algerian war was over.